Welcome everyone. In this video, I'm going to build a waterfall model with a catch-up to the general partner, or GP. This waterfall is based on a common real estate private equity deal structure in which the limited partner, or LP, contributes the majority of the capital, if not all of it. In Tier 1, the LP receives their invested capital back, followed by a preferred return. Tier 2 is the GP catch-up, in which the GP receives 100% of the cash flows until they've received 20% of the total deal level cash flows, and that's an important distinction. Then everything beyond Tier 2 is split 80% to the LP and 20% to the GP. This waterfall is commonly known as an 80-20 catch-up. As you'll see, I've completed most of the formatting and cash flow inputs to save time, so let's get started by inputting the splits at the top. First, we'll say that the general partner will contribute 5%, and the limited partners will contribute 95%. So that's 1 minus 5%. Then let's set the preferred return at 8%, and the GP catch-up will be 20%. Finally, in Tier 3, all cash flows above Tiers 1 and 2 will be split 20% to the GP and 80% to the LP. Now that that's complete, we can start to build our waterfall. So we're going to link our general partner contributions, the percentages, and the limited partner percentage. And then we're going to take the GP and the LP contributions. We'll lock in the column. We will lock in the row for the total equity contributions, and we'll copy these down and across. So this is just showing what each respective partner is contributing at the beginning. Of the 1 million, the LP contributes 950, GP contributes 50. And I've also inputted the cash flow after debt service numbers. These will be hard-coded, or I should say linked from the rest year model. And so for the total cash flow, total deal level cash flow, we're going to take our total equity contributions, and we're going to add those to the cash flow after debt service. We'll copy these across. And why don't we sum each of these up? Okay. So let's take a deal level IRR. That's just the IRR function. And then the equity multiple. So for an equity multiple, I usually use the absolute value function. Total cash flow after debt service divided by total equity contributions, 2.54x. So a pretty good deal. This is an acquisition. And now we'll start to do the Tier 1 LP preferred return. So as you'll see, this is just for the LP. This is the LP's capital account. Reason being, as I explained at the start, Tier 1 is only to the LP. 100% of the cash flows. So we don't need a GP section. And to start, we're going to take the beginning period of balance from the previous period. And since this is year 0, that would be nothing, which is why I leave an empty column in the models for this purpose. So our invested equity is just going to be the LP's invested equity for each period. And then the accrual is going to be the preferred return. So why don't we link that over here, which is 8%. And so we're going to take 8%, lock in the column, and multiply it times the beginning of period balance from this period. Okay, so I'll explain what's going on after we go through all this. But these top 3 numbers are all going to be negative, and then our distributions are going to be positive. So to get the distributions, we're going to use a min function, which is going to take the minimum of the cash flow after debt service that's available in this period, and the negative sum, and it's negative because these 3 numbers are negative and we want it to return a positive number, of everything that's outstanding in this period. And then our end of period balance is going to be the sum of everything from the BOP balance, invested equity, accrual, and distributions. So we'll copy these across, then I'll explain what's going on. So at the start, in year 0, that would be at the closing, the LP contributes $950,000. And then at the end of year 1, there's that $950,000 that's outstanding. The LP had contributed another $47,500 in year 1. And the LP received, or was due rather, $76,000 in year 1, which is 8% of the outstanding balance from the previous year. But there's only $65,000 in year 1 to distribute. So they get all of that $65,000, and then the balance is what's still outstanding. So that continues on until we have enough cash flow from the sale, in this instance, to be able to pay back everything that's outstanding from the previous balance, any new contributions, which would be nothing in this model, and then the accrual for that period. That's all paid back, and then nothing is left over. So how do we check this? Well, we should do an IRR check to make sure that they're receiving their money back plus their 8% preferred return. And so we take our invested equity plus the distributions. We'll copy that across, and then we'll use an IRR function to check, and 8%. So we're all good. Next, we want to find out the cash flow that's flowing over into Tier 2, and to do that, we'll take the total cash flow after debt service, and we will subtract the total distributions from Tier 1. And that's going to leave you with $1.16 million, roughly, flowing into Tier 2. Okay, so here's where the catch-up takes place, and the cash flow owed to the GP is going to be 20% of the total cash flow, so let's link that. What does this mean? First, let's go back up here and sum this up. Okay, so in the first tier, the LP received roughly $1.55 million in cash flow. Now, this should be, at the end of Tier 2, 80% of the total deal level distributions, of which 20% is going to go to the GP in Tier 2. So what we'll do is we'll take this number, the 1.55 roughly, and we'll divide it by 0.8, let's say. So that's 1.935 million that should be distributed to both partners by the end of Tier 2. Now what we're going to do, let's make this an actual formula. So equals 1.55 million divided by 1 minus 20%. Okay, and then we're going to subtract what was already distributed. So this is the balance that's owed to achieve that previous number we just talked about, 1.935 million. So this is what's owed to the GP in Tier 2. And now we have to figure out how that's going to be distributed. And that's also going to be a min function similar to the distribution row in Tier 1. So we're going to take the minimum of the cash flow that flows to Tier 2 and what should be distributed in Tier 2. We'll lock that in, minus the sum of what's already been distributed in Tier 2. And we will lock in the first H52. So why are we doing that? Why is it a little different? You'll see the number gets distributed right here at the end, as it should. So what's going on essentially is we're anticipating that, well, what happened if maybe 100,000 flowed through here in year 6? All right, so if 100,000 flows through here, then you really need to distribute 387,098. And the total would be 387,098. But some of it was already distributed in the previous period, so we have to subtract that from what is owed in Tier 2. So that's all that function is doing. And the net GP cash flow is going to be the GP contributions plus what's distributed in tier 2 to the GP. And we can do an IRR check. There really isn't a check here, but that's just the IRR at the end of tier 2 to the GP and the percentage of total profits. Really, we're going to check this later on in the model. But it's going to be, actually we could do it this way. Why don't we sum this up over here? What's actually distributed divided by what should be distributed plus what was distributed in tier 1. And that's 20%. So what is going to tier 3? Well, that's simply what flowed into tier 2 less what was distributed in tier 2. Copy that across, and about 730,000. So cash flows to tier 3. We'll copy these across, and then we're going to divide this up just like we did the equity contributions at the start, except we're going to be using the tier 3 splits. So we'll lock in the column, we'll lock in the row, we'll copy down and across, and those are our tier 3 distributions by partner. Now we're going to have the cash flows by equity partner for the entire deal, and we're going to check everything. So our equity contributions for the GP, let's go up top. And then our distributions, well, there was nothing in tier 1, right? There was only tier 2 distributions plus tier 3 distributions to the GP. And we take the sum of that. And we'll do the same thing here for the LP. So the LP contributed in row 26. And then the distributions were in tier 1 and in tier 3. And we'll sum those up. Copy across. And we'll sum everything up for each of the rows. Okay. So the IRR to the general partner, 39.52%. The equity multiple, we'll use the absolute value function. The total distributions, gross, divided by the equity contributions, 10.15x. That's pretty good. And then the percentage of total cash flow. So here's our check. We're going to take the gross distributions to the GP throughout the deal, divided by the cash flow after debt service. And that's 20%, so it works. And why don't we do the same thing down here? I'm going to lock in the cash flow after debt service so we can copy this down. And there we go. The LP receives a 13.5 IRR, 2.14 equity multiple, and 80% of the total cash flows. So just going through this again, what's happening? Your general partner is contributing 5%, your limited partner is contributing 95%. But in tier 1, the LP is receiving all of their capital back plus an 8% preferred return. Then all cash flows above that flow into tier 2, in which the GP receives 20% of the total deal level cash flows. Then above that, all cash flows flow into tier 3, in which they're split 80-20, LP, GP. So essentially, as long as you achieve or exceed the tier 2 hurdle, the total deal level cash flows will be split 80-20 between the LP and the GP, which this confirms down here. So hopefully you found that helpful, and let me know if you have any questions.